Erica froze mid-sentence as she read the manuscript title, The Mother at the Back of the Room. It wasn't part of the program. Her mother-in-law, Linda, had just handed it to her. In front of a packed audience, Greg stood beside the stage, pale, silent, caught between them. Photographers raised their cameras. And Linda? She finally took her seat, front row, no longer invisible. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The room didn't just fall silent, it froze. You could hear the scrape of a chair leg, the hiccup of a nervous laugh dying halfway through a guest's throat. My daughter-in-law, Erica, stood poised behind a floral-draped podium, her sleek bob catching the soft gallery lights, her voice cool and certain as she read from the first page of her debut novel. To all the women who taught me what not to become. The air shifted. It wasn't just shade, it was a full solar eclipse. I smiled, softly, automatically, like a motion I'd rehearsed in the mirror for years. But under the table, my hands gripped the sides of my chair hard enough to whiten the knuckles. No one turned to look at me, but I felt the weight of their knowledge anyway. My son Greg stood near the back wall, one hand stuffed in his pocket, the other gripping a plastic cup of white wine like it was an oxygen mask. He didn't look at me. Not once. He stared at the floorboards like they'd whisper how to disappear. Erica cleared her throat, flipping the page with a theatrical flair. Some women smother with kindness, thinking it's love. Others can't see the line between control and care. This book is for the women who broke that cycle. There was a ripple of awkward laughter. One woman in a green wrap dress laughed a beat too loud, then covered her mouth. A man near the refreshments coughed, his eyes darting between Erica and the cake table like he'd rather be anywhere else. No one said my name. They didn't need to. I was the ghost in the room they were all pretending not to see. The same room I had decorated with garlands earlier that morning. The same cake I had baked from scratch. 3 tiers, lemon and lavender, her favorite since the baby shower I hosted 3 years ago in my backyard. Greg's eyes met mine for half a second, then dropped again. I had driven 4 hours from upstate for this. Stayed in a midtown hotel that smelled faintly of bleach and air freshener trying too hard. Worn the navy dress she once complimented, because it looked expensive, even if it wasn't. And I had brought her a hand-wrapped copy of a cookbook I found in a second-hand shop, the kind she used to say reminded her of home before everything got complicated. Funny, I thought. She didn't seem homesick tonight. As the reading ended, applause broke out. Scattered at first, then steadier, as if everyone had agreed not to make it too weird. Erica descended the stage, all polished pride, while I sat still, my fingers smoothing the creases of my dress over and over like they might disappear if I just kept at it. The signing table was quickly surrounded. A line formed, guests clutching copies of Wife, interrupted, smiling, asking for selfies, wine glasses dangling from their fingers. Erica laughed easily, pen gliding over title pages. Her voice, so saccharine in person, rang out, "Of course, thanks for coming. Oh, you have to tag me if you post that." I stood quietly near the cake. No one came to thank me for baking it. No one noticed who had. A man I didn't recognize cut himself a thick slice and walked away, crumbs trailing behind him. My chest felt tight, but I didn't cry. I hadn't cried in years, not since the night my husband passed and I sat on the laundry room floor, holding one of his flannel shirts, cold and damp from the dryer. I looked one more time toward Greg. He was laughing at something a woman beside him said. Erica was posing with a couple I vaguely remembered from their wedding. No one noticed as I slipped my purse strap over my shoulder and turned for the door. The air outside hit sharp and fresh. I walked. Not aimlessly, but with a strange sort of purpose I didn't recognize until I reached the end of the block. There, nestled between a boutique candle shop and a wine bar, was a small glass-fronted publishing house. No crowd, no applause, just a single desk lamp glowing inside. I paused, then opened the door. The bell above the door jingled softly as I stepped in, the scent of ink and new paper greeting me like an old friend. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Linda said as the receptionist looked up from her desk, pen paused mid-form. "I'm here to tell the truth." The receptionist, barely 20, nose ring, chipped black nail polish, blinked at her like she hadn't expected someone in orthopedic wedges and a wool coat to say something like that. Linda offered a smile. Not warm, not cold, just steady. "I have an appointment with Camilla Bell," she added, holding out a neatly folded email printout. The girl nodded and buzzed the door. Upstairs, the elevator groaned open into a narrow hallway lined with framed book covers, bright ones, grim ones, titles in gold foil, some she recognized, some she didn't. The air smelled like paper, printer ink, and something faintly sweet. Chamomile tea, maybe. Linda followed the sound of typing until she saw a door propped open with a stack of galleys. Camilla Bell looked up. "Mrs. Clark?" "Linda, please." Camilla stood, offering a hand and a smile that was disarmingly kind. "Thanks for coming. Want to grab coffee around the corner? The office machine tastes like burnt plastic and regret." The cafe was cramped and painted in mismatched earth tones. Indie music crackled faintly from overhead. Linda ordered an herbal tea. Camilla got something cold and complicated with oat milk. They sat by the window, condensation threading down the glass. "I should start by saying," Linda began, fingers fidgeting with the strap of her handbag, "I didn't write this for anyone. It was just something I kept." She pulled out a slim, stapled packet. Clean font, double-spaced, the title printed plainly, "What She Doesn't See." Camilla took it with both hands, treating it like something fragile. "I'll just peek," she said, thumbing to the first page. Linda watched the girl's face carefully. Her lashes stilled mid-blink. Halfway down the second paragraph, Camilla's straw stopped moving. "Wait." She set the iced drink down. This is powerful." Linda's stomach fluttered. "It's just memories. Notes, really. It doesn't read like notes. It reads like someone's been watching from behind a curtain for 20 years, and finally pulled it back." They talked longer than Linda expected. About the difference between kindness and performance, about how silence can feel like surrender. Camilla asked about the day Linda first noticed things shifting. Linda exhaled, slow. It wasn't dramatic. Erica never shouted. It started with little comments about my clothes, the casserole I brought over, how I hovered too much around the baby. At first I thought it was stress, or generational. Then I realized she didn't want me close. She wanted me useful and invisible. Camilla leaned back, eyes thoughtful. "Did you ever push back?" Linda shook her head. "I figured if I just stayed supportive, she'd come around, but after a while, staying quiet felt like agreeing." Camilla nodded, then slipped the pages back into the envelope carefully. "I can't promise anything," she said, "but I'd love to finish reading this. May I keep it?" Linda hesitated, then nodded once. "Just no names, no selling it to page 6. Camilla grinned. "Scout's honor." They stood outside in the Brooklyn wind, parting with vague promises to be in touch. Linda walked back to her hotel alone, unsure what had just happened, but knowing something had shifted, slightly, subtly, like a hairline crack in glass you don't notice until the whole thing suddenly gives way. That night, she washed off her makeup slowly, watching her own reflection in the mirror. She looked tired, but something else flickered in her face, like a match held just long enough to burn. She left her phone charging by the bed, unsure if it would light up, but at 11:42 p.m., it buzzed once. A new email. Subject, "Next steps?" From Camilla Bell Body. "I showed it to my senior editor. Can we meet again? Soon?" Linda stared at the screen. Her finger hovered over the reply button, heart pounding like it hadn't in years. The manuscript that was never meant to be read was now sitting in a Manhattan office under track lighting, its dog-eared edges brushing against polished mahogany desks. Linda had never imagined it would go this far, pages written at 2 a.m. in silence, never for an audience, never for publication. It was her quiet grief, typed in invisible ink. And now someone else had seen it. She stared at the blinking cursor on her email screen. Camilla's message had been simple. "We'd love to talk next steps. Are you open to expanding this into something fuller?" Linda wasn't sure what fuller meant. More pain? More memory? More vulnerability? She closed the laptop and stood from her kitchen table. The house was still. Outside, wind curled under the window panes like a secret trying to get in. She made tea, peppermint the only thing she could stomach when her nerves prickled like they did now, and carried it to the living room. On the coffee table sat a weathered leather binder, her real manuscript. Not the tidy printout she gave Camilla, but the raw version. Sticky notes, coffee rings, scribbled margins. Years of moments no one else had cared to witness. She opened to a random page and read, "PTA meeting next Thursday. Erica asked me not to come, said it might confuse the teacher. I wasn't even going to speak, just wanted to sit in the back and feel included." Another entry, months later, offered to help with wedding planning. Erica smiled and said, "We're going for something more modern, Pinteresty." It felt like being handed a polite rejection letter to my own son's life. Each page told the same story, kindness offered and gently refused, over and over, 1,000 little paper cuts. The next day, Camilla called. "I know this is a lot," she said, her voice careful, like she was walking across ice. "But there's a quiet gravity to your writing. It's not just sad. It's honest. I think people need that." Linda hesitated. "This wasn't supposed to be a tell-all." "It doesn't read like one." "I don't want revenge," Linda said softly. "I'm not trying to win anything." "I know." There was a pause, brief but thick. "I want to write the truth," Linda said, "but on one condition, no names, not Greg, not Erica, no identifiers. I don't want to hurt them." Camilla's reply came slowly. The words dipped in something bittersweet. "That's fine. But we'll still know exactly who it's about." Linda didn't answer right away. She traced the rim of her teacup, staring at a crack in the saucer she hadn't noticed before. "You know," she finally said, "I used to think I was being too sensitive. That maybe it was just me. That maybe Erica didn't mean it that way. And now," Camilla asked, "now I think silence lets people rewrite you." She remembered a Thanksgiving 5 years ago. Erica had cooked that year, and Linda had arrived with her famous pecan pie. Erica had thanked her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, we're doing a low-sugar thing this year, but I'm sure someone will eat it." She'd left the pie on the counter, untouched. Later, she'd found it in the trash, still in the glass dish. Camilla's voice pulled her back. "So, is that a yes?" Linda looked at the leather binder on her lap. The pages didn't cry or scream. They simply stood there, quiet and waiting. "Yes," she said, "but I write it my way." "We wouldn't want it any other way." Camilla lowered her voice, almost conspiratorial. "And Linda, we're not the only ones reading. A senior at our parent company got hold of it. Things might move faster than we thought." The cursor blinked like a slow, steady heartbeat. Linda stared at the blank page, her fingers hovering above the keys. When she finally typed the first line, it was more exhale than sentence. "Some wounds don't bleed, they simmer, they stain." Each keystroke felt like stitching shut something that had been gaping open too long, not healing it, just naming it, giving it form. She wrote slowly, the room wrapped in silence but for the soft clack of her keyboard. Her living room smelled faintly of lavender and dust, half from the candle she lit every morning, half from the years she'd spent sitting in this exact chair, quietly shrinking herself. She typed about the wedding planning, or what was supposed to be. The memory came sharply, no effort needed. Erica had stood by the kitchen counter, flipping through a Pinterest board on her phone. Linda, trying not to hover, had gently suggested using a family heirloom tablecloth for the cake table. White linen, hand-embroidered, the one from her own wedding. Erica didn't look up. "That's sweet," she said flatly, "but we're going for something more modern, minimalist." Minimalist, Linda had learned, was code for not yours. She wrote that down exactly as it happened. No bitterness, no clever framing, just truth. In another chapter, she detailed the night Erica found her old cookbook on the kitchen shelf, a spiral-bound relic from the 60s with a floral cover and rusted edges. Erica laughed out loud, flipping through it like a gag gift. "Why does everything sound like 1940s trauma disguised as food?" she'd said. "Gelatin molds? Ham loaf? Linda, this is culinary PTSD." Linda had smiled, small and tight. She hadn't said that those recipes came from her mother, or that she'd once won a pie contest with one of them. She remembered placing that book back on the shelf when no one was looking, like tucking in a child that had been mocked at school. And then there was Greg. The night he sat across from her on the back porch, the baby monitor in his lap, the cicadas had been humming so loudly it felt like the air itself buzzed. "Mom," he said gently, "can you give us a little more space? Let us parent our way." Linda had nodded. What she didn't say was that she had been up every night for 3 weeks helping Erica recover from an emergency C-section, that she'd scrubbed breast milk from the couch cushions and rocked their colicky baby while Erica sobbed in the shower. She typed it all now, clean, sparse lines, not defensive, not angry, just there. After a week of steady writing, she sent Camilla her first batch of pages. The reply came less than a day later. Subject: your page's body. Linda. These are quietly devastating. Don't change a word unless you want to. Linda closed the email and sat in the silence. Not the kind of silence that shrinks you, the kind that settles around your shoulders like a wool coat, soft, groundé, warm. But then, on a Wednesday afternoon, the phone rang. She almost didn't answer. The number was unrecognized, and she was elbow-deep in draft edits. But something in her chest fluttered, and she picked up. "Hello?" There was a pause. "Mom?" Greg's voice. Linda stood up slowly. Her breath caught, but she kept her tone even. "Hi, sweetheart." He cleared his throat. "Listen, Erica's publisher just reached out. Apparently someone over there thinks you're writing some kind of rebuttal, like, to her book." Linda felt her throat tighten, but not with panic. Something colder. "I'm writing my story," she said quietly. "That's all." "Well, they're asking questions. Erica's freaking out." Linda walked to the window. Outside, her neighbor's dog was barking at a squirrel on the fence. She watched it, calm. "I'm not naming anyone, Greg, I told you that." "I know, He exhaled. "They're saying it could be a problem. For her brand, for the streaming deal. She blinked. "What deal?" He froze, realized he'd said too much. "Look, I gotta go," he said quickly. "Just maybe slow down, okay?" The line went dead before she could reply. Linda lowered the phone, her reflection staring back at her from the dark window pane, steady, quiet, unshaken. But in her chest, a new question burned. Why didn't they tell me about the deal? Linda had written in silence for years, but now the silence was breaking, and it didn't sound like applause. It sounded like footsteps. Fast, angry ones. The knock came hard on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 sharp raps that made the framed photo of her and Greg at his graduation rattle slightly on the wall. She didn't need to look through the peephole, she already knew. She opened the door slowly. Erica stood in her entryway, wrapped in a long camel coat, sunglasses still on though the sky was overcast. Greg stood behind her, hands in his jacket pockets, jaw tight. He looked like a man called to referee a fight he didn't ask to watch. "Hi, Mom," Greg said, his voice already weary. Erica pushed past Linda into the house without waiting for a reply. "So," she snapped, spinning around once they were inside, "is it true?" Linda closed the door gently. "Is what true?" Erica pulled out her phone, tapping furiously. "You're writing a book, about me, about us. Camilla Bell? Ring a bell?" "I'm writing a memoir," Linda said evenly. "About my life, not yours." Erica laughed, cold, bitter. "Oh, come on, don't play coy. You know exactly how this looks." "I know what it is, Erica. It's not a hit piece. It's not revenge. It's my story." Greg stepped forward, rubbing the back of his neck. "Why didn't you tell us, Mom? We could have talked about this." "You mean asked permission?" Linda's voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. "Did either of you ask me before using our family dynamic as seasoning for Erica's little literary debut?" Erica's lips curled. "This isn't about fairness. This is about you riding my coattails." That word, riding, landed like spit in the face. Linda felt it deep in her gut but didn't flinch. "I don't need your spotlight, Erica," she said quietly. "I was writing before you knew how to spell narrative." Greg sighed. I'm stuck in the middle here. Linda turned to him slowly. Then maybe stop standing in the middle. Maybe pick a side. The room fell still. Years ago, Greg had called her a poet. She remembered it clearly, junior year of high school, after he read her short story tucked into a Christmas card. You make stuff that hits, he'd said. Like it's soft at first, but then it stings in a good way. Now, he stood there like he couldn't remember the woman who raised him. I never meant to create drama, Linda said finally, but if telling the truth looks like drama to you, maybe that says more about the story than the storyteller. Erica muttered something under her breath and walked out without another word. Greg lingered for a second. You sure you want to do this? He asked, not cruel, just tired. I already did. After they left, Linda stood in the entryway, fingers trembling slightly as she reached for the banister. The quiet returned, but not the peace. Her email pinged. It was from Camilla. Subject line, cover draft. Thoughts? She opened the attachment. A clean white background, soft serif font, and in bold, centered lettering, Not the Mother-in-Law You Remember by Linda Clark. The cover was restrained. Elegant, but under the minimalism it pulsed with something fierce. Her breath caught. She wasn't invisible anymore. That evening, as she folded laundry in the den, her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Camilla. It was a number she didn't recognize, area code Los Angeles. She answered, wary. A woman's voice spoke briskly. Hi, I'm calling on behalf of Erica Mann's publicity team. This is a legal courtesy. You should be receiving a formal cease and desist regarding any unauthorized content referencing her likeness or life details. We recommend pausing all forward movement. On your project. Linda didn't speak. She just hung up. Then, calm as brushing lint from a sleeve, she opened her email, found the letter already waiting in her inbox, and forwarded it directly to her lawyer. Her lawyer replied within minutes. Let them try. Your voice is protected. And just below that, also, have you seen Variety? Her book's been picked up by Netflix. The call came on a rainy Thursday, while Linda was pulling banana bread from the oven. The scent of cinnamon filled the house, sweet and grounding, until her phone lit up with an unfamiliar 310 area code. She wiped her hands on a towel and answered, expecting maybe another lawyer or a PR rep. Instead, the voice on the other end was silky, controlled, and unmistakably rehearsed. Hi, Mrs. Clark. This is Chase Remick, executive producer on the Mother Arc, Erica Mann's adaptation. First, let me just say we admire your voice. The buzz around your manuscript, well, it's caught a lot of ears. Linda didn't speak. She let him squirm in the silence. So, Chase continued, clearing his throat, I wanted to run something by you. A potential compromise. She raised an eyebrow and leaned on the kitchen counter. We think your perspective has value, and if you'd be willing to pause any formal publication or even just delay it, we'd be happy to offer you a consultant credit on Erica's show. You'd be part of the process, quietly, but meaningfully. Linda blinked once, slowly. So you want me to trade my truth for a line in the credits that nobody reads? He chuckled lightly. Think of it more as a bridge. I'm not looking for a bridge, she said. I'm building my own house. A long pause. Then, understood. She hung up before he could say anything else. 3 weeks later, Linda stood beneath the same hanging Edison bulbs that had lit Erica's book launch, only this time, the bookstore was nearly empty. 12 folding chairs had been set out. Only 10 were filled. One woman held a cane. Another was knuckle-deep in a Kleenex before Linda had finished the 3rd page. The reading was quiet, intimate. No podium, no fanfare. Just Linda in a navy cardigan, her voice low and steady as she read from the chapter called The Refrigerator Light. It was about coming over to Erica and Greg's house to drop off groceries after the baby was born. Erica had been too tired to speak, and Linda remembered opening the fridge and realizing it was nearly empty. She hadn't said anything, just stocked it. But later, she overheard Erica telling a friend, I swear she judges everything we eat. The audience sat still. One woman, red scarf wrapped around her neck like a shield, raised her hand. You just described my mother-in-law. I never saw her pain before. Not like that. Linda felt something loosen in her chest. Not satisfaction, not pride. Just release. Afterward, a woman approached her with a weathered envelope in hand. She was in her 70s, her lipstick a shade too bright, her eyes wet. I couldn't stay, she said, pressing the letter into Linda's palm. But I read your pages online. My daughter-in-law died last year and we never made peace. Your story helped me forgive both of us. Linda nodded, too moved to speak. She clutched the letter like it was made of glass. That night she brewed tea and sat by the window, legs tucked beneath her, the letter resting unopened on her lap. The street outside was quiet, headlights streaking through puddles like ghosts slipping past. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was Camilla. She answered, and Camilla didn't even say hello. An influencer picked up your excerpt. Linda's heart skipped. What kind of influencer? Mom blogger, 3 million followers. She posted the paragraph about the wedding planning. She said my lace tablecloth was too sentimental, but the real issue was me. It's everywhere. Thousands of comments. Linda pressed her palm to her forehead. The window reflected her face, still, stunned, half in shadow. Camilla was still talking. This might change everything. Linda's email pinged again, this time from Good Morning America. Subject, interested in interviewing you. National segment. It began not with a headline or a phone call, but with a quiet digital ripple. One tag, buried in a sea of notifications Linda didn't usually check. She had been folding laundry on a rainy Wednesday morning, the scent of dryer sheets and warm cotton curling through the house, when her phone buzzed softly on the armrest. At first, she ignored it. Then it buzzed again. On the screen was a screenshot of a paragraph from her manuscript, the one where she had written about the lace tablecloth her daughter-in-law dismissed as too sentimental. The caption, written by a woman Linda didn't know, read, "This is my mom's story too." At first, Linda just stared at it. Her hands paused mid-fold over a navy sweatshirt, Greg's old college logo still faintly cracked across the front. She clicked the post open. Below it were dozens of comments, some brief, some deeply personal. And by the end of the day, there were hundreds. People had begun resharing her words, embedding them into their own stories. One woman confessed she had misunderstood her mother-in-law's quiet gestures for passive aggression until she had a child herself. Another shared a voicemail from the woman she used to think was overbearing, a soft voice offering to drop off soup after a surgery. Linda's words had not just struck a chord, they had opened a floodgate. The reach grew fast, but quietly. There were no flashing headlines or viral hashtags, just women and men, spouses and in-laws, unpacking years of buried emotion one paragraph at a time. Every time Linda refreshed her screen, more stories poured in. A woman in Ohio wrote, "I spent 10 years pushing my husband's mother out. I never thought to ask what she felt. Your words made me cry on the train." Someone else simply said, "She wasn't perfect, but neither was I. Thank you for the mirror." Linda didn't need Camilla to tell her what was happening. She could feel it. Still, Camilla called anyway, breathless, barely letting her speak. "You're trending on Substack. You're all over Book Talk and millennial parenting forums. People are stitching your words into their own lives, and they're doing it with reverence." It should have felt validating, and it did, in part. But what surprised Linda more than anything was how heavy it felt to be seen after so long being invisible. It wasn't giddy. It wasn't triumphant. It was quiet and grounding, like suddenly remembering your own name after years of answering to someone else's. But the reaction inside her family was colder. Greg stopped calling, not angrily, not dramatically. He simply stopped. The silence itself felt like a verdict. Linda told herself she understood, that he was trying not to choose sides. But deep down, she knew what side silence always stood on. Erica, in contrast, was loud in the way only the internet allowed. Without naming names, she tweeted, "It's amazing how some people will weaponize being forgotten, like they were never part of the problem." It was petty, transparent, and not even clever, but it stung just the same. Linda didn't respond. not to the tweet, not to the silence. Instead, she focused on what was blooming beyond the walls of her strained family dynamic. When a producer from The Nest and the Needle, a top-rated podcast that explored generational narratives, reached out, Linda was stunned. She'd never even listened to a podcast before, but Camilla assured her it was an honor and a smart move. At the Manhattan studio, Linda sat under warm track lighting in a softly soundproofed room, her notes trembling slightly in her hand. The mic was large and intimidating, but the host, Lena Burke, had a gentle voice and thoughtful eyes. She didn't ask for spectacle, just truth, and Linda gave it to her. She spoke about the loneliness that settles in when you've spent years being helpful, but never wanted. She described how easy it is to disappear in your own family, and how much effort it takes to keep showing up anyway. Her voice was a little shaky at first, but it found its rhythm. The producer gave her a thumbs up from behind the glass. The episode aired on a Tuesday. By Thursday morning, it had been streamed more than 100,000 times. In the final moments of the interview, Lena's closing words drifted into earbuds and living rooms across the country. We don't forget the ones who were always there, even when we erased them. Linda listened to the playback while standing at the kitchen sink, one hand braced against the edge of the counter. When it ended, she didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just breathed, slow and deep, like something had finally settled inside her. Then her inbox pinged. At first, she assumed it was another listener message, but this one had a different weight to it. The subject line read, "Formal acquisition interest, memoir rights from acquisitions editor, Pengrove Books." She clicked it open. The message inside was short, respectful, and direct. They wanted her story, a major imprint, national distribution, a real, full-scale publication, and just beneath the contract summary, a postscript. P.S. Erica's publisher tried to block this. They backed down. Linda reread the line, her hands steady now. The fight wasn't over. But the silence? That was finally broken. The envelope was thick, glossy, and smelled faintly of perfume. Linda knew it wasn't meant for her. Not really. Her name wasn't on the original guest list. The invitation had only made its way to her mailbox because Sharon Mendelson, a friend of Greg's godmother and a woman who never took no for an answer, had emailed Erica's publicist directly with a pointed, "Surely Linda will be there?" The card inside shimmered with embossed lettering. Final stop, a night with Erica Mann. Book tour celebration, Chicago. Black tie optional. Reception to follow. Linda held it between her fingers for a long time, not angry, not even surprised, just aware of the fact that she'd been invisible for so long, her absence now had to be negotiated by others. She placed the invitation on the kitchen table and walked away. That night, Erica announced the event on social media with no shortage of flair. A slow-motion reel of her walking into bookstores, laughter over clinking glasses, shots of fans holding her book up to their chests like talismans. The caption read, "Let's close this tour the same way we started, with honesty and heart. Chicago, I'm coming home." Linda didn't like the post. She didn't comment. She didn't reach out. 2 days before the event, her phone buzzed with a message from Greg. "Greg, hey, just wanted to say, maybe best if you don't come to the finale. Things are tense. Erica's on edge. It's not personal. Just, yeah, no apology, no phone call, not even a 'sorry, Mom.' Just, it's not personal," as if that could untangle the knot in Linda's chest that had been tightening for months. She didn't respond. Instead, she went to her printer. It took 20 minutes and 3 paper jams, but eventually it spit out a freshly formatted copy of her final manuscript. Clean, simple font, no photos, no flourishes, just her story, on her terms. On the title page, she typed one line, centered and bold, "The Mother at the Back of the Room," by Linda Clark. She had never been a woman for drama, but she had never believed in retreat either. The guest house in Chicago sat on a quiet side street lined with early spring magnolia trees. Linda checked in under her own name, carrying nothing but a weekend bag and the manuscript tucked inside a brown folio. The night of the event arrived with the kind of early April chill that crept up through pantyhose and wool. The venue was a converted ballroom with marble floors and Art Deco light fixtures that cast golden halos against the ceiling. Linda slipped in during the opening remarks, dressed in a charcoal gray coat, her hair swept back, her lips bare of color. No one noticed her. The room buzzed with press, influencers, fans, and literary hangers-on. The seating had been arranged theater-style, and Linda slid into a chair in the last row, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. On stage, Erica glowed. She wore deep burgundy, her voice smooth and confident as she thanked the crowd for believing in her journey. She read an excerpt about reshaping identity through boundaries, and the room nodded, laughed, applauded. Linda listened quietly, taking in every word, not as a critique, but as a confirmation. Erica hadn't changed. She had just polished the performance. After the applause died and people began to rise for wine and photos, Linda stood and made her way down the aisle. She moved through the crowd like mist, seen only by those who truly looked. She approached the stage as Erica stepped off and turned toward her handlers. Erica. The name was soft but unmistakable. Erica turned, momentarily confused. Linda held out the brown folio. Erica took it with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "What's this?" "Just something I thought you might want to read." Then Linda turned and walked away, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. Backstage, beneath a haze of perfume and stage lights, Erica opened the folio. Inside was a printed manuscript, crisp and clean. Her eyes caught the title, and for a moment, just one quiet moment, she froze. The Mother at the Back of the Room. Erica read the title again, slower this time, her fingers tightening around the pages as the murmur of celebration outside faded into a low, uncertain hum. Sometimes truth doesn't need a microphone, it just needs a door left slightly ajar, a moment of pause, a chance for someone to finally listen. Linda's story slipped into the world not with the thunder of headlines, but with the hush of something deeply human. It arrived quietly, like steam rising from a teacup. Gentle, constant, impossible to ignore once seen. The Mother at the Back of the Room was released with little fanfare, no book tour, no PR circus. But readers found it, and once they did, they held it tight, as if it had been written in the spaces between their own family arguments and dinner tables. The memoir was sparse in style but full in spirit. Linda didn't spin drama or exaggerate conflict, she described what it meant to give and be unseen. Her words didn't accuse, they revealed. There were no names, no pointed fingers, just carefully drawn memories. Birthday parties where she took photos no one looked at, holidays she cooked for, then spent quietly clearing dishes alone while others laughed in the next room. Readers, across book clubs, parenting forums, and even quiet corners of TikTok, called it a gut punch in a whisper. The most shared quote came from the final chapter. "Some women grow smaller to make space. Eventually, they forget what it felt like to take up a room." The contrast with Erica's persona became impossible to ignore. While Erica posted curated shots from panels and writers' retreats, Linda's pages did something more lasting. They stuck. They echoed. They opened wounds. The publisher leaned into it. In one ad, they described Linda's work as the memoir that redefines the modern mother-in-law. Bookstores placed it under categories like family and healing. It sold modestly but steadily, like water dripping on stone. The kind of book passed from hand to hand with sentences underlined in soft pencil and teardrops blurring certain pages. At a tech firm in Boston, Greg sat in his glass-walled office, fingers hovering above his keyboard, staring at the email he'd just received. Subject line, your mother's book. It wasn't from a friend, it was from a coworker. The message was simple. Didn't know she was a writer. Some of this hit hard. You okay? Greg closed the laptop. He came home that night late. Erica was in the living room, laptop open, watching a replay of her recent panel discussion. Her voice on-screen was articulate, poised, perfectly lit. Greg sat on the arm of the couch. "Did you read it?" She didn't look up. "Parts." He hesitated. Do you regret it? Erica looked at him then, finally. Regret what? Shutting her out. Pushing her away. Erica leaned back, folding her arms. Only that she's finally using her voice, and that people like the sound of it. It wasn't cruel, just matter of fact, and that made it worse. Greg didn't reply. He stood, walked into the kitchen, and opened a cabinet. For the first time in a long time, he wondered what it would have been like if his mother had stayed for more birthdays, if he'd made space for her instead of just handing her crumbs and calling it kindness. 2 mornings later, Linda sat in the small reading room of the public library back in Albany. She had taken to spending quiet hours there again, like she used to before Greg got married and everything shifted. The chairs were still the same scratchy corduroy. The scent of old paper and floor polish filled the air, nostalgic and oddly comforting. She had just placed a returned copy of Eudora Welty, A Writer's Life, on the cart when her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She didn't recognize the number, but something, intuition perhaps, made her answer. Hello? The voice on the other end was bright, practiced. Hi, Mrs. Clark. My name is Ellie Garrison. I'm a features writer for The Atlantic. I hope this isn't a bad time. Linda blinked. No, not at all. I've read your book, twice, and I'd love to do a profile, something reflective about legacy and late-life voice. We're thinking of calling it The Other Version. Would you be open to that? Linda turned slowly toward the tall library window. Outside, snow had started to fall. Thin, flurried, gentle. She hadn't expected this, not this way. She answered softly, Yes, I think I would. But as she hung up, her inbox pinged again. This time, from an address she hadn't seen in years, gregclark79@gmail.com. Subject line, Can we talk? Linda never expected to see her own face in print again, not since the blurry PTA newsletter photo 2 decades ago, where she stood behind a bake sale table, half cut off and entirely uncaptioned. But this was different. This wasn't about brownies or box tops. It was visibility. The article in The Atlantic went live on a clear Tuesday morning under a headline that made her pause. Her side, finally told. The piece was restrained, beautifully written. It traced her journey with quiet precision, no dramatics, no oversimplifications, just steady, deliberate truth. Ellie Garrison had captured it well. She described Linda's prose as a gentle excavation of a life overlooked, and her story as the emotional echo chamber so many women find themselves inside and don't know how to escape. Linda read it once through on her tablet, then again, slower. She let the words settle like snow on a windowsill, soft but permanent. By noon, her inbox was flooded. A message from a woman she'd worked with at the district office 10 years ago. I had no idea. You were always so composed. Her old neighbor from across the street. I wish I'd asked more about how things were after Greg moved out. And surprisingly, an email from Erica's estranged cousin, Melissa, whom Linda hadn't seen since the wedding. I knew something was off back then. Thank you for telling it. Even if you never said her name, I heard everything I needed. But the most piercing question came in the form of a quiet DM from a woman in Milwaukee. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? Linda sat with that for a long while. Then she typed the only honest answer she could. No one asked. The group chat pinged hours later. Greg's name lit up first. Mom, just saw the article. It's a lot. Then Erica's bubble popped up, furious and fast. So now you're a saint? A martyr with a publicist? Congrats on turning victimhood into branding. Another ping followed. You're deliberately misrepresenting what happened. You know what that makes you? A liar. A strategic one. Linda didn't respond. Greg didn't either. The silence after Erica's final message stretched on like a canyon between them all. The next day, a handwritten letter arrived in Linda's mailbox. Cream envelope, pressed handwriting. The return address listed a therapy office in Maine. She opened it at the kitchen table, sunlight warming the wood as she read. Dear Mrs. Clark, I'm a clinical therapist and educator at a small liberal arts college. Your memoir is now required reading in my family systems dynamics class. I've never seen my students respond with such visceral empathy. Your story has become a framework for understanding the unspoken tensions that shape domestic life. Thank you for writing it. You gave language to something most of us only feel. Linda pressed the letter against her chest for a moment before setting it gently beside her teacup. She didn't cry, but her breath trembled. That evening, her cell phone rang while she was making soup, the scent of rosemary and garlic curling through the house like memory. "Hello?" she answered, cradling the phone between her cheek and shoulder. "Hi, Mrs. Clark. This is Tessa Miller from Polara Books, Erica Mann's publisher." Linda froze, wooden spoon suspended mid-stir. "We're organizing a special panel at the New York Literary Summit next month, focused on narrative duality in memoir writing. Erica has confirmed her attendance, and we'd like you to join as a co-panelist." Linda leaned against the counter, her grip tightening around the phone. "I'm not interested in performative reconciliation," she said carefully. "Of course," Tessa replied, voice honeyed, "but this would be a chance to bridge narratives, to show both sides of a complex story. We think your presence would be powerful." Linda paused, the smell of the soup suddenly too strong. "You mean convenient," she said, "because your brand wants my truth to serve your storyline." There was a beat of silence. "It's a chance to shape the cultural moment. Together." Linda's eyes flicked toward the printed panel announcement already live on the event website. Her name was already listed. She hadn't even said yes. Erica smiled like nothing had ever happened. Perfect teeth, perfectly effortless posture, a gleam in her eyes that could pass for warmth if you didn't know what simmered underneath. The ballroom lights caught the highlights in her hair just so, and the mic clipped to her blazer blinked red, waiting for her voice. Linda sat beside her on the elevated panel stage, hands folded in her lap, spine tall. Her dress was a soft navy, her earrings modest pearls. She hadn't curled her hair. She hadn't rehearsed a word. That was the condition she'd given the organizers. No scripts, no pre-approved questions. If they wanted her voice, they could hear it live, unfiltered. The moderator, a younger woman with cat-eye glasses and the nervous energy of someone juggling 6 talking points, cleared her throat. "We're here today to talk about competing truths," she began, voice amplified, eyes darting between them. "To explore the ways in which different narratives from the same family can coexist. Erica, would you like to start?" Erica took the microphone without hesitation. "I think," she said, her voice smooth and shaped by years of keynotes and curated press, "that it's important to recognize that memory is subjective, that we all experience events through different emotional lenses. My book was my truth, and I welcome others to share theirs." The room nodded, some even murmured. Cameras clicked softly. Her publicist smiled from the third row. Then Linda was handed the mic. She didn't smile. She didn't preamble. "I used to believe silence was noble," she said, voice steady and low, "that it meant grace, that biting your tongue and stepping aside was the cost of being a good woman, a good mother, a good anything." The room grew still. "But silence isn't noble, it's lonely, and over time it becomes the kind of erasure you learn to enforce on yourself, until you can't remember the sound of your own thoughts anymore." Someone shifted in their seat. The moderator blinked twice but didn't interrupt. "Sometimes," Linda continued, "the quiet ones weren't weak. They were tired." A hush. Not discomfort. Wait. An inhale. Held. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the audience, slow applause. A few claps. Then more. Until the room erupted, not in thunderous cheers, but in a warm, rising wave of acknowledgement. Recognition. Linda placed the microphone back in its cradle. Erica's eyes flicked toward her, unreadable. She adjusted her blazer and leaned toward the mic again. "I think what we're seeing," she said, with that same tight polish, "is the power of storytelling to open dialogue, even painful ones." But her voice lacked the conviction of before. Her words didn't land. The applause had already said everything. The panel. Wrapped 10 minutes later. The moderator thanked them both. Cameras clicked again, but no one rushed the stage for selfies. They lingered instead, softly talking, quietly moved. Linda stood first. Erica followed more slowly, head bowed as if reading something no one else could see. Halfway down the backstage hallway, Erica stopped. "You blindsided me," she said, just loud enough for Linda to hear. "No," Linda replied without looking back. "I just didn't disappear on cue." Erica left through a side door, offering a tight smile and vague wave to a group of waiting press. Her heels clicked fast against the tile, gone before the first question could reach her. Backstage, Linda walked toward the private lounge where her coat was waiting. She felt grounded, not triumphant, not vindicated, just clear. As she turned the corner, she saw him. Greg. He stood near the coat rack, hands jammed in his pockets, eyes softer than she remembered. "Mom." She didn't answer at first. He stepped forward, voice quieter now. "Can I come home with you tonight?" Linda met his gaze, heart heavy with hope and hesitation. Before she could speak, her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. A notification lit the screen. Subject: The Myth of the Martyr, Erica Mann's next book proposal. Greg stood at the threshold of the house he grew up in, duffel bag in one hand, keys in the other, and nothing, absolutely nothing, to say. The familiar creak of the door as it opened was like a breath caught in the lungs. Inside, the scent of lemon oil and something faintly spiced greeted him, unchanged from the hundreds of evenings that had once lulled him to sleep. Linda stepped back to let him in without a word, her gaze searching his face as though she wasn't sure which version of her son had shown up this time. He set the bag down gently in the hallway, avoiding her eyes. His shoulders sagged beneath his coat, like gravity had added 10 pounds on the train ride upstate. They moved wordlessly into the kitchen. The late afternoon sun filtered through sheer curtains, casting a soft, honey-colored glow across the floor. The old pinewood table, scratched, nicked, and impossibly sturdy, still stood at the center of the room. Linda had once said it would outlast all of them. Greg took a seat, fingers laced together tightly, elbows on the wood. Linda placed a mug of black coffee in front of him and sat down across from him, neither touching their cups. For a long moment, all that moved was the clock on the wall. "I'm tired," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tired of being caught between people I love, tired of making peace that never lasts, tired of managing her moods, of pretending I agree with everything just to avoid another fire." Linda nodded once, slowly. Her expression didn't shift, but her hands, resting in her lap, curled gently into themselves. He looked up, eyes rimmed in exhaustion. "You didn't deserve what she wrote. You didn't deserve how I went along with it either." Linda inhaled carefully. She didn't say, "I forgive you." She didn't offer comfort too quickly. That wasn't what this moment called for. "I never asked you to take sides," she said. "I only asked you to see me. But I raised you to know better than this, didn't I?" Greg dropped his gaze. "Yeah, you did." The words hung between them, not as an apology, but as an admission. She stood then, moving to the hallway and returning with a cardboard box. She set it on the table, the lid slightly ajar. Inside were letters, dozens, maybe more, stamped envelopes, folded stationery, hand-drawn cards. Greg reached for one and unfolded it slowly. His lips moved silently as he read. "I never thought people would care this much," he murmured, still staring at the page. "That they'd connect like this." Linda watched him, her voice steady and low. "They didn't know I existed." That landed. He looked up at her, a deep well of guilt flickering in his eyes. "I didn't know either," he said. "Not really." She gave him the faintest smile. It wasn't cruel, just sad and true. They spent the rest of the evening in a sort of gentle quiet. Linda reheated stew from the fridge. Greg helped wash the bowls. They didn't speak much. The silence between them had shifted, no longer the weight of avoidance, but the balm of shared knowing. Later, Greg stretched out on the living room couch, the same spot he'd collapsed onto during all-nighters in high school, or after baseball practice, or when he needed to feel safe. His shoes were off, coat folded on the armrest. The soft drone of late-night news hummed from the old TV, but neither of them were watching. Linda walked past him once, paused in the doorway, then turned off the kitchen light. "You can stay as long as you need," she said. "Thanks, Mom." When she climbed into bed, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She picked it up, expecting maybe Camilla or a reader message, but this came from a blocked number. Anonymous tip. She's writing another book. Working title: The Myth of the Martyr. Linda stared at the screen, pulse slowing. For the first time in years, her son was home, and Erica was sharpening a new weapon. Linda didn't need to outright Erica. She didn't need to top her, match her, or dismantle whatever half-finished story Erica thought she still controlled. What Linda needed, what she had never allowed herself before, was an ending on her own terms. No rebuttals, no noise, just closure that belonged entirely to her. The offer came 3 weeks after the anonymous tip. A second book deal. This time, it wasn't a memoir. It was a proposal for a collection of essays, reflections on motherhood, grief, womanhood, and the politics of being politely erased. The email sat open on Linda's laptop for 2 days. Camilla had written it with her usual care, the kind of optimism only a young editor with an uncanny eye could carry. The money was generous, the exposure would be bigger. It was everything most writers would kill for. But Linda closed the lid without responding. She stood by the window of her study and watched the wind brush through the bare branches in the yard. Spring had not quite arrived. There was no bloom, only the whisper of it. And that's where she wanted to stay, not harvesting new stories from old wounds, but letting the season turn. When she finally called Camilla back, she was gentle but firm. "I'm grateful," she said, "but I think I already said what I needed to say." Camilla didn't argue, she just sighed. "You wrote the kind of ending most people never get. I respect that." Instead of writing, Linda started mentoring. Not in any official capacity, just word of mouth, emails passed around through indie writing groups and college programs. A few young women, some just out of grad school, others balancing full-time jobs and caretaking roles, began showing up on Zoom calls with coffee mugs and trembling sentences. They brought stories about complicated mothers, distant fathers, childhood bedrooms that still echoed with things never said. Linda didn't edit them harshly. She didn't reshape their voices. She asked questions like, "Who were you trying to protect by leaving that out?" And "What did your silence cost you?" One young woman, a poet from Baltimore, paused during a late-night call and said softly, "You helped me say the things my own mom couldn't." Her screen froze for a moment on a tear tracking down her cheek. Linda smiled. "That's your story now. Say it." Greg found a small apartment 15 minutes from her house, a modest third-floor walk-up with light hardwood floors and peeling window trim. He painted the walls himself. He began therapy. Twice a week. He didn't say much about it at first, but he showed up on Sundays with groceries, or sometimes just for dinner, and when Linda asked if he was okay, he would nod and say, "Getting there." It was the kind of honesty that didn't try too hard to impress. One evening, she opened the hall closet to find his baseball glove, cleaned and tucked beside a stack of winter scarves. She smiled and left it there. Erica, meanwhile, went quiet online. Her once frequent posts, filtered, styled, carefully captioned, began to thin out. No announcements, no teasers, no publication dates. Words circled back to Linda through Camilla and a few quiet whispers in the literary world. Erica's second book had stalled. The early chapters weren't landing. There was talk of a reframe, a delay. Linda didn't gloat. She didn't mention it to Greg. She simply let it pass through her like a breeze that no longer chilled. Peace didn't come with applause. It came with quiet mornings, with folded laundry and the kettle whistling and the dog-eared books she returned to again and again. She had not won. She had released. One morning she was rinsing a teacup when her phone rang. She dried her hands on a dish towel and answered with her usual soft, "Hello?" Camilla's voice crackled through with excitement. "Hey, I have one last question. Totally optional, but I had to ask." Linda leaned against the counter. "Go ahead." "Do you want to record your audiobook?" Camilla asked. "In your voice?" There was a long pause, the kind that filled not with hesitation, but reflection. Linda looked out the window, the morning light spilling across the kitchen tiles. "Yes," she said. "I think it's time they hear what I sound like." Linda stood inside the recording booth, surrounded by thick foam walls that swallowed sound like secrets. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark glass of the engineer's window. Faint, soft, steady. She wore simple silver earrings and a navy cardigan, the same one she used to wear on chilly mornings when Greg was a boy and she'd pack his lunch before sunrise. The headphones were heavier than she expected, warm against her ears. A mic hung suspended in front of her, inches from her mouth, its metal grill gleaming under a cone of overhead light. She could hear her own breath as she adjusted her script. The first chapter of The Mother at the back of the room, her fingers trembling just slightly at the edges of the page. "You ready when you are?" came the quiet voice from the other side of the glass. The engineer, Marcus, gave her a thumbs up and rolled the track. She exhaled, then began. "My son was born in March, when the snow still lingered along the sidewalks like unfinished thoughts." Her voice was hesitant at first, the vowels tight, but by the second paragraph, something softened. She found her rhythm, not theatrical or performative, but grounded, like a woman reading a letter she'd written to herself long before she knew anyone else would care. She didn't rush. She paused when the sentences needed breath. Her voice caught twice. Once when describing the moment Erica had asked her not to come to the PTA meeting, and again when recounting the pie she found uneaten in the trash. But she didn't break. The tears came quietly, dried just as quickly. Marcus didn't stop her. 3 hours passed in near silence, except for the sound of her story weaving itself through the microphone and into a permanent record. When she stepped out of the booth, her voice a little hoarse, Marcus handed her a bottle of water. He smiled, soft and sure. "You've got a voice that doesn't yell," he said, "but it lands like thunder." Linda blinked at him, unsure how to receive praise that felt like it had been waiting its whole life to be heard. The audiobook released 2 weeks later. Camilla sent the first message. "It's exploding on audio platforms. People are crying in their cars. It's unreal." Listeners described it as like hearing your mother talk to you just once without trying to fix you. Others called it gentle but gutting. Several tagged Linda directly, though she didn't have social media. Camilla read the comments to her over the phone. In her hometown library, Linda asked if she could reserve a room to play it aloud for anyone who wanted to come. The head librarian nearly cried on the spot and insisted they host it themselves. The night of the listening circle, chairs were arranged in a wide oval beneath soft overhead lights. A table in the back held tea, cookies, and a bouquet of daffodils in a mason jar. Linda stood by the entrance, greeting people with polite hugs and handshakes. She wore the same cardigan. The room smelled like paper and lemon polish. To her quiet astonishment, nearly 30 people came, including the mayor, who had once coached Greg's Little League team. At the end of the evening, he approached her and said, "You made invisible things seen." Linda nodded, blinking quickly. She didn't need a certificate. That was enough. Back home, she kicked off her shoes and dropped her bag on the chair in the entryway. She lit a candle on the mantel, vanilla and clove, and turned on the kettle. Just as she reached for her favorite mug, her phone buzzed. It was an email. The sender's name made her go still. From Erica Mann. Subject, just one letter. Linda sat down slowly, the mug forgotten. She stared at the screen, heart steady but guarded. She clicked it open. Inside was a single line. "You always said more with less. So here's mine." Attached, a scanned, handwritten letter, dated 3 days earlier. Linda didn't know what the letter would say. But she knew this time, whatever waited for her inside that single page of ink and paper, she wouldn't flinch. She sat at the kitchen table, the light from the window laying warm lines across her forearms. Her fingers hesitated over the mousepad before clicking the attachment. The scan opened slowly. First the top edge of cream-colored stationery, then the curve of Erica's slanted handwriting. The note was brief, no salutation, no signature. "I didn't think you had it in you," it read. "Turns out you always did." There were no apologies, no unraveling of past offenses. Just that one sentence, a complicated mix of admission and, Linda could hardly believe it, pride. Or at least something like it, frayed and strange around the edges. She stared at the letter for a long time, her chest neither tight nor lifted. It didn't change the past. It didn't repair anything. But it didn't reopen wounds either. It simply sat there, an acknowledgement that had once seemed impossible. Linda printed it, trimmed the paper to size, and placed it in a simple frame. Not hidden away in a drawer, not taped inside a journal. She set it on the shelf next to her writing desk, tucked between a photo of Greg as a toddler and her signed contract with Pengrove Books. A beginning, a middle, and an unexpected epilogue. Weeks later, the annual Upstate Book Fair unfolded across the local civic center like a patchwork quilt of stories and voices. Rows of folding tables covered in linen cloths bore stacks of titles with everything from true crime to cookbooks. There was the faint scent of fresh print ink, coffee from the concession stand, and the dry sweetness of old floor wax. Linda arrived early, her booth simple but unmistakably hers. The publisher had arranged something subtle, just her name in small block letters and a neat stack of "The Mother" at the back of the room, fanned out beneath a matte sign that read, "Memoir that reframed the role." She wore a soft cream sweater and dark pants. No makeup beyond a swipe of lip balm. A small ceramic bowl of butterscotch candies sat at the edge of the table, a nod to her mother. At 11:08 a.m., she noticed a new banner being set up 2 tables down, and then she saw it. Erica. She wore black, sleek and pressed, her name displayed in glossy gold. The table beside hers held crisp new editions of Wife, Interrupted, and a glossy poster teasing the upcoming The Myth of the Martyr, coming soon. Linda didn't react, didn't blink. She returned to signing a book for a woman in a green scarf, but later a woman no older than 30 approached Linda's table. She looked unsure at first, eyes drifting between Linda and the neighboring booth. Then she picked up Linda's book and held it to her chest. "I read your chapter about Thanksgiving," she said, voice trembling. "The one where you watched your son laugh in the next room while you washed dishes alone, that was my mom. And I never saw her until I read it." Linda felt her throat tighten. The woman held out the book. "Would you sign it for her?" Linda took the pen, her handwriting slow, deliberate. "To all the mothers we forget to see. Linda Clark." As the young woman walked away, Linda looked at the table across from hers. Erica was laughing with a reader, animated and poised. But for a brief moment she glanced up. Their eyes met, neither smiled. Neither looked away too quickly. Just long enough. That evening, as the event began to wind down, Linda stepped outside for air. The late afternoon sun cast a golden sheen over the sidewalk, and a soft breeze tugged at the hem of her coat. Her name badge fluttered against her chest. A woman passed by and gave her a nod. Someone else whispered, "That's her," and pointed discreetly. Linda offered a quiet smile, not out of pride, but acknowledgement. She had not written revenge. She had written remembrance. And now, her words no longer lived in shadows. They moved through the air, caught in conversations between daughters and mothers, in quiet reading nooks, in the hands of people who finally saw someone they once overlooked. She walked toward the parking lot, the wind gently lifting her scarf. She didn't look back. Some stories don't end with a slammed door. They end with a voice finally heard.